This is Counter Mentors with Kelly and Robbie Riggs. Finally, a place where you can get both perspectives on challenges in the workplace from a boomer and a millennial. The Counter Mentor is the new leader. Join us as we show you how to blend the very best of both generations, young and old. This is Counter Mentors, and here are your hosts, Kelly and Robbie Riggs.
Hey, welcome to Counter Mentors. Great to have you on board as we get started today. How to coach and be coached by a millennial. Yet another episode where I have to endure hearing how great millennials are. I mean, this is
that's what the show's all about.
It makes me absolutely crazy. By the way, Counter Mentors, we're the show where we tell millennials to get with a program, and we tell boomers you need to change a freaking program because it doesn't work very well. It's episode number 29. You can find out more about us at countermentors.com. Follow us online at Counter Mentors. And of course, Robbie, we welcome in a great guest this week.
Pumped. Yes.
Tim Sanders. And anybody who's been around a little while probably knows Tim. He wrote the book, Love is a Killer App, New York Times bestseller, absolutely incredible book. And then a book that we actually reference in our upcoming book, shameless plug right here on video.
We're great at those.
Yeah, we are great at those. It's called Deal Storming. And if you're in the sales world, deal storming is, I'm going to use the word, it's probably trite and overused, but it's a game changer. It's a phenomenal book. Really enjoyed it. You can follow Tim on Twitter at Sanders Says. Make sure you do that. Great follow. And he's all over the internet doing podcasts and great things. Has his own podcast as well. Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast before we get into today's topic?
Absolutely. It's going to be starting up this fall. It's called Highly Motivational. It'll be a Facebook Live show hosted by the Blue Jeans Network. We're going to go find a few stories that are highly motivational every week and then give everybody that watches the Facebook Live some tools to lead a more positive life in a negative world.
That's going to be great stuff.
Unrelated, he's doing the story of my life as like that. I think it's the first or second episode. I don't remember. We're still working on the details and on the fee that he's paying me.
Clearly the episode last time has gotten to your head completely. In the episode number 28, Tim, we talked about millennials being better leaders based on a recent HBR article that produced some
science.
Yeah, they produced some fake news about this whole topic. But anyway, so it completely got to his head. And I'm having to deal with it. Well, listen, it's great to have you in. We're going to talk about how to coach and be coached by millennials. Let me open it up this way. Why would someone have an interest, and I mean this in a serious way, why would someone have an interest in being coached by a millennial? It seems sort of counterintuitive to the boomer leader. I'm the coach. I'm the one leading them down their career path. Why should we switch the tables and be coached by a millennial?
Because millennials are digital native. They've figured out how to multitask without reducing processor performance. They've, most importantly, a generation by definition, like if you want to do #science, a generational cohort, like a boomer, like a millennial, they are created because of world events that occur during formidable parts of their childhood. Or as Maslow used to ask, where were you when you were 11? Okay, so the millennials, unlike the boomers, have observed interdependent as opposed to divisive events in their early years. For example, 9/11 is a generational teachable moment.
Right.
School shootings, like Virginia Tech, is a teachable moment. And all of them taught that generation to work together, to be interdependent. Our entire survival depends on the kindness of strangers. Now let's back it up a little bit, right? Kelly, let's talk about the boomers. I'm born in 1961. What happened to me when I was 11? I watched Nixon resign. I watched protests in the street to the Vietnam War, right? So those weren't teachable moments that caused us to work together interdependently. In fact, those were divisive moments that made us more like Ayn Rand's Fountainhead than Simon Sinek's Together is Better. So as a boomer, I surround myself with younger talent that knows more about how to use digital tools. They have a better instinct about working together as a tribe. And quite frankly, I can be much more candid with them than I can a fellow boomer who might get his feelings hurt. And I got to say, I don't know if you guys have talked to Scott Stratton, the unmarketing, unselling genius. Scott Stratton likes to say that millennial is a word boomers use to describe someone they do not like.
Man, Tim, there's so
now
much.
Wait to hold it.
I have so many things I want to say right now.
Yeah, but he said boomers get their feelings hurt.
I know.
I thought happy. Snowflakes got your feelings hurt.
No, I'm so happy.
So here's the difference. So if we looked at Maslow's hierarchy, which is completely, we could talk later on about what Maslow's hierarchy is for millennials versus boomers. But anyway, if we look at it, what I mean is that when you say a millennial gets their feelings hurt, really, the millennial feels like they're either being rejected or they're not safe. And that's what we mean by a snowflake, right? When I say a boomer gets his feelings hurt, it means that his legacy has been questioned.
Yes, that's right.
His esteem has been challenged.
Yes, the idea of taking all they've done, and it could be wrong, or there could be a better way to do it. I mean, there's nothing more devastating. I mean, I've seen it in my own personal life of consulting over and over and over and over. I mean, you're exactly right.
And I do a lot of research on generational cohorts because I have to deal with it in my training world, in the speaking world. I come from digital and advertising. They're all young, okay? They're all young. Right. It's probably 70% of the top performing workforce already in the advertising business. It's going to be 90% in a few. I'm not kidding you guys.
That's crazy.
The average producer of an ad campaign is probably 23, 24. So you have to understand these cohorts. What I'll tell you is a couple of things. The greatest generation thought the boomers were going to ruin the world, were lazy, had a low sense of morality, and
I feel like
were not patriotic.
Yeah,
so if you talk to the greatest
perfect
generation about boomers, they really saw something bad coming. The boomers thought the echo boomers, which would be just that cusp of Generation X, were also lazy and unmotivated. And what was interesting is that we, as the echo boomers, as the boomers, we had this X generation, which was the first generation we didn't despise because we didn't pay attention to them. They were the
That's right, because they were completely glossed over.
So X was like left at home while the overworking, accumulating boomer was out. Very small generation, in plummeting birth rates. So for the first time, we had a generation we didn't disrespect. Now then, here comes the millennials, digital native, most of them. My son's 32, so he's been online since he's been about 8. Right. I'm a digital immigrant. I've been online since I've been about 37. So it is a different generation. But I think what I see in the workforce as I go out and talk to companies, the big difference, the thing that really bugs the boomers that we have to just tackle head on, is the perception of the boomers is that the millennials want a promotion without getting the work done. That, you know, the millennials like somebody that works at a branch bank, right? They're like, I've been here, I've had a great quarter, when am I going to be a vice president? And it's a great misunderstanding. And so when you talk to boomer managers, I think that's their number one complaint, is that the millennial feels entitled to be promoted. They don't want to put in the hard work we had to put in to get promoted. And here's what I say, don't let the words get in the way.
Right.
What we know about the millennial is that one of their greatest motivators in the world is to master something. One of their greatest angsts in the world is to be bored. Okay. So the next time a millennial comes to you and says, I want a promotion, or you think you hear that. What I want you to hear them really saying is, I'm finished with this level of the game. Please put me at a different level.
That's right.
So
I want to be challenged. Give me something more.
I want to be challenged, right?
Yeah.
So what we've experienced at some of my clients, like Cox Media Group or even Career Builder, is that a lateral move into a harder assignment creates just as much satisfaction as a promotion, a new title, and even an incremental raise up to 10%. Okay? So just understand that because the millennial generation is digital native, because multitasking, and I'm not talking 2 things at once, I'm talking about 3 to 4 things at once, has been a part of their life forever, they are faster at mastering routine skills. We need to be cognizant of that and move them around accordingly.
Yeah, Tim, and I think the big challenge, and we see this over and over and over, is that word, you used it in the beginning, is that word respect. And when the millennial says, I'm done, I can do this better, this is too easy, I want to raise, I want to whatever, the boomer sees that as a sign of disrespect, whereas the millennial sees that as a sign of, let's go. Like, I mean, this is what I've been doing my entire life, my entire career. So we say career very intentionally. They've had some side hustle since they were 14. So I think it's important that we talk about that word respect. And I want to zoom in really intentionally. We talk about generational cohorts on how we were taught how to learn. So in school, at university, in grad programs, the millennial generation was taught very, very differently, and all the way from teaching styles, case study, group work, to exams, group exams, presentations, take-home exams. Talk to me about what you've seen as you've studied the different generations and how that learning difference has manifested itself in huge conflict in the workplace.
First of all, I got to point something out. Kelly, I want you to notice Robbie is influenced by TED Talks. You can always tell by language. So he's moving his arms like Simon Sinek. I just love that. Yeah, that's the thing. And I'm going to bridge to why that's important. Millennials will learn how to tie a tie by watching a YouTube video, not by asking their father to show them how to tie a tie or going to the store where they get their suits and having that demonstrated. As a result, we've got a generation that lives on accelerated learning, right? So they learn things at a fraction of the time. But let's look at 3 generations. Let's look at Boomer, Xer, and let's look at Millennials, and let's give them words to describe them, okay? Boomers are climbers. They climb up the ladder. They do sequential work to earn respect, accumulate wealth, and gain power. And it's a climbing effect. It's about working hard and to some extent working smart. But mostly, it's really about working hard.
Right.
The Xers, and it's a small cohort, were known as slackers. So the Xer found a way to do the least amount of work possible to produce the minimal amount of accumulation. They were the least greedy cohort in history. In fact, the ultimate Xer author friend of ours is who? Tim Ferriss, who wrote a book called The 4-Hour Work Week, which was an aspirational book about how not to be like our parents, the boomers, and be workaholics. Okay, so we got the climbers, we got the slackers. What are the millennials? They're the hackers. The millennials take what author Shane Snow calls smart cuts, lateral thinking. So with the millennial, everything's a game, everything's a challenge, everything is about reducing steps and reducing stuff. So they take a hacker approach to everything, from how they do their homework, how they perform their job, and most importantly, how they pursue success in life. And I think we have to embrace those 3 things, okay? Because none of them are bad. The boomers' belief in climbing is a hard work ethic that will always be important for the rest of time. The Xer slacker mentality was like the Xer, I think his last name was Manson, and he wrote a book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Yeah,
okay, it's a stoic. It's a very stoic paradigm. It's the slacker paradigm. It says don't care about stuff so much. Don't care about how much money you have. And there's some value in that. And then, of course, the hacker mentality is the future. I mean, I ask people all the time, do you know what the street address is for Facebook headquarters?
No.
The ultimate millennial company. You know what their street address is?
No.
For those of you on the Google who just found it, it is One Hacker Way. I am not kidding.
That is awesome. That's such a Zuckerberg, Zuckerberg thing. Yeah.
So a hack is an elegant solution that's usually direct, if not crude, to a problem.
That's right.
That's
well,
what
and especially when we think about the word hacker, how much does that fly in the face of climber? I mean, when we think about what really pisses the boomer off is that when I first started my job, I showed up 5 minutes before the boss and stayed 5 minutes after the boss, and it was a sign of. But as a hacker, I'm going, hold on, I can get more done in my robe before 10 o'clock than you can all week sitting in that chair. And so, and this is a conversation that Pops and I have had over and over and over. So, I mean, Pops, when you hear slacker versus hacker versus climber, I mean, well, I'm really interested to see what your reaction is to that.
No, I think it makes complete sense. And I think that, like, what Tim's implying is that each of those brings a certain value to the workplace. It's just a question of how you assimilate the best of each of those across the board. If boomer manager is trying to force climber on the hacker, you've got conflict, and ultimately that's going to go wrong.
And guess who loses? Guess who loses? The customer loses, right?
Loses. Absolutely.
Because the great enterprise finds a way to pull these generations together and produce a better outcome, right? So we've got to figure this out very quickly, because if we don't, we're going to have, like Instagram, like Tesla, we're going to have millennial-dominated companies that don't design products for aging boomers. I mean, we're creating a problem for ourselves, and that's why I made a decision, years ago, to really focus. All of the people I hire, all the contractors I hire, they've got to have that hacker mentality to work with me, because that's the future. I embrace it. And Kelly, you and I have talked before. I'm a climber. It's in my DNA. So when I talk about being a New York Times bestselling author, people say, how'd you do it? I say, well, what I didn't do is hire that guy, write a $100,000 check and put 50,000 copies of my book in 16 industrial dumpers. I know that's not how I became a best-selling author, which is generally how most people in our space do it today. I did 400 radio interviews, getting up 4 a.m. every morning for 3.5 months. And 11 months after the book came out, it hit the list, because that's how a boomer does it. We take the hard approach.
Grind. That's right.
But that's not a bad thing. So let's dial back the conversation, because I've been thinking a little bit about this idea of counter mentor. And I want to just give you my take on it, because I study mentorship. And when I mean I study mentorship, I don't just study the practice of mentorship. I'm like Sheldon Cooper, Dr. Sheldon Cooper. I'm obsessed with etymology. I am freaking obsessed with the science of words.
Yeah.
Because the origin of words creates the software code that drives a culture.
No doubt.
Right.
No doubt.
Right? So I'll illustrate this before I go mentor. Collaboration. So if you look at the history of the origin of collaborate, which was what deal storming was all about, it goes back to Western Europe, to a phrase which means, translated, to confer with the enemy. So collaboration came from the idea of treason. It came from conferring with the enemy, where the dissident and the insurgent compared notes to overthrow the kingdom. No wonder in corporate America or in the world, collaboration is the last resort, not the first response. So let's talk about mentor.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm going to send you guys something for show notes on this, because there's a wonderful set of books here I can refer to on the history of mentorship. But let me just kind of tell you where it starts. It shows up in popular literature in Homer's Odyssey, right? So in Homer's Odyssey, Athena, the Greek goddess, shapeshifts into mentor, and she's going to help Telemachus on his journey to find his father and reunite, and rebuild the kingdom. And so that's where the whole wise old woman or wise old man archetype shows up in popular literature. But, Homer's Odyssey didn't invent this. This was part of Greek mythology. If you go back and look at Greek mythology, mentor came from the word menos. And the word menos has a lot of definitions, but I'll tell you the one that's most interesting. Menos is about the courage to teach. You see, in Greek mythology, the gods didn't mentor the humans. Oh no, it was different than that. The demigods, the lesser gods, the enlightened humans mentored the Greek gods, who were frequently too temperamental to be effective. Right. So there's a famous story of Chiron, the goat human being, lesser god, who had been giving very good mentorship advice to Hercules about war fighting and thinking like a human. Hercules was so offended that Chiron would have the gall to give him mentorship advice. He shoots Chiron with the magic arrow, to which Chiron begs the gods for death, and Minos became a philosophy. And mentorship is about courage to teach, about empathy to respect, and about openness to receive the feedback from the student. So if you think about it, even in the narrative today, like I call it the Star Wars Karate Kid narrative that they popularized now in reality shows, if you think about it, the best mentors, they follow a 3-step process, and they're really consistent about doing this. So the first thing that you do as a mentor is you identify a hero, because that's what mentors do. The mentors find a hero, person that demonstrates heroic qualities, courage, ambition, pluck, drive, purpose. But that hero is going somewhere a little too fast. Yeah. There's some delta of knowledge that the mentor thinks they can solve. Right. So they give that hero a gift for the next stage of his or her journey. That's how all the stories work, right? And the mentor takes satisfaction from the student learning, not from the student being grateful to the mentor or giving the mentor credit. And they engage the mentee with a specific learning objective, a curriculum. So this whole idea that I'm going to take you under my wing and mentor you is BS. That's not mentorship. That's ownership. Okay? If you, like one of the most important mentorship experiences I ever had was when the late, great Stanley Marcus Jr. in his 80s decided to mentor me in my late 30s on CRM, because as the retail giant, he knew it cold. It was a delta. When I was working for Mark Cuban, it was when I met him, I was producing the Neiman Marcus webcast for their big expensive book and everything. And he had a couple of conversations with me about CRM, and he realized I didn't know anything about CRM like he did. So he took me under his wing for that one topic, and it was very clear up front that that's what he was going to teach me. But here's the thing I learned from Marcus. There's a third step in effective mentorship. And if you go back and watch the movies, pay attention to the stories, it always shows up. Step number 3 is empowerment.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is not just to give the hero knowledge, it's to give the hero courage and confidence and to move them forward, because success is not a destination, it's a direction. So Mr. Marcus always left dessert to open himself up for me to teach him what I knew about the digital economy that was on the way. This is 1997. Because everybody needs to learn something. Mr. Marcus always believed that we stop reading books at precisely the time of life we should be doubling down. It's a shame, he says, right? So what he would do is like, he would ask me, well, Tim, tell me a few things about e-commerce I might not know. I've read about this, I've read about that. And I'd be like, I'm so grateful to him because he's teaching me, right? So I give him everything I have. And so one of the lunches, he shared with me why he always put time aside for that. You know, he said that mentoring young, bright talent is my number one learning program. He says,
it's so true.
If you empower the mentee to give back, you will never get dumber by trying to mentor other people. So I just want people to think differently about mentorship. I think mentorship is something you do for someone you care about that's going in the right direction. So you might mentor down to somebody that's working for you. You might mentor up to someone who needs to understand some stuff that you know. You might mentor to the peer. In fact, if you think about it, Kelly, what's the best-selling sales book of the last 5 years? And I'm gonna give you a hint. It's sold 400, at this point, it's sold 400,000 copies. And it's a B2B book.
I have no idea. I mean, I wouldn't know. I mean,
Challenger sale. The Challenger sale.
I mean,
right?
I could think of 3 or 4, but I wouldn't be able to pinpoint it.
So the Challenger sale sold 400,000 books. It's probably 2x, 2.5x the second best selling.
Is it that much?
Book.
Okay,
it's that much, dude.
Yeah, I didn't know.
It's that much. And it's and by the way, another statistic here. It's probably 80% bulk, where a leader bought it for her entire team. So it's not a onesie twosie. So when you look it up on Amazon, it's only ranked 1100. But if you look it up on the back of BookScan, it's probably ranked top 50 for nonfiction at all times. Okay, here's why I'm saying this.
Wow.
Not out of jealousy. Love those guys, Brent and Matt, all those guys. Those guys give me faith in the U.S. parole system. Hey, Brent, no means no. Anyway, so let me tell you why the Challenger sale is the number one best-selling book in the last 5 years and will probably be the best-selling B2B book of all time. Because it taught salespeople to be mentors. Because the premise of the Challenger sale, as we know, well, not the premise, but the main premise of the Challenger sale is that your buyer is empowered with digital information and they are 57% through the journey before you ever sit in front of them to make the first pitch. And most of what they find is wrong. And your number one job is to unteach them. And the thing you've got to do is take control of the conversation by challenging them with a disruptive insight. The sweet spot of the Challenger sale is when you can point to the customer and point to the action and say, you are wrong. Okay, well, that really appealed to sales leaders everywhere who instinctively knew that we've got to stop thinking wise old man, wise old women, and going out timidly like sheep trying to sell our products. We've got to have the courage to teach. Just like Chiron, we got to look that SVP of sales at a huge manufacturing company in the eye and say, that selling approach is wrong in 2017. Let me present you with a disruptive insight based on research, based on real experiences that can put you in a better place. What the Challenger research says is that when you effectively do that, you generate real differentiation in the eyes of the customer. You generate loyalty. You generate sell-through. You generate brand where they consider other products. So anyway, I think it's a real opportunity for us to pursue mentorship at every level, up, down, younger, older, richer, poorer. I think we all gain from the experience.
Hey, if you're listening,
Dad, it fires me up for our book, because that's basically what we do in the book is we step on everybody's toes and tell them they're all wrong.
Yeah, we do. Hey, listen, if you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher, thanks for joining us. Tim Sanders joins us and with some amazing knowledge bombs here. And it's at Sanders Says. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, and you can listen to it and watch the video, by the way, at countermentors.com. But
right.
I want to take exactly what you talked about in the Challenger sale, Tim, and I want to move it over into the corporate workspace where I've got young, high-performance millennial coming in, and he or she is now going to work for an entrenched boomer who is not nearly as enlightened as you are. My suspicion is that millennial is not going to come in and challenge that boomer in the way that you would challenge an SVP of sales, because they have the potential to get themselves blown out and create this huge conflict. Or is that wrong?
No, I mean, I wrote an article called The Art of Unteaching, and it was for Hartford Funds. If you Google The Art of Unteaching, I talk about one of the most important steps in unteaching is to respect the good in a bad idea, right? Because an idea really isn't good or bad. It's either current or outdated.
Yeah.
And usually it's outdated because the constraint or the best practice has become obsolete, that the whole thing's premised on, right? So the first thing you've got to do when you challenge someone, by the way, I never say, I'm going to mentor you. I never say, I'm challenging you. I say, when I'm talking to
I got to write that
boomer,
one down. Hang on, that's a tip. Write that one down. All right, I got it.
Okay, do that, write that down. Okay.
I will not say that.
When you're talking to someone, especially someone who's senior to you, someone who expects you to respect them, well, the first thing you got to do is show respect by respecting the good and the bad idea. So usually what happens is if I were, let's say this, Robbie, if I was you and I was working for you were working for Kelly, not father son, but just
terrible
to go to
idea,
work for him.
but
And Kelly's an entrenched boomer, and let's say that Kelly has this approach where he says, listen, here's what we do. We don't do LinkedIn messaging to sell. We get in our car and we drive to the office park and we knock on the door and we drop off a business card and we learn the name of the receptionist. Well, you can't say, well, that's a bad idea, dude. Look at all this research on social selling. It's the only thing that gets through. You have to say, well, the first thing that makes sense to me, Kelly, is that the face-to-face contact, establishing a connection with the administrative assistant at the front door, I can only imagine that over the decades, that was a key strategy at actually getting the first face-to-face meeting. That being said, let me show you some data about this thing that's happened over the last 5 years, or even better yet, let me show you some data over the last 20 years since caller ID started and how it's affecting all kinds of prospecting. So what I want to share with you is that most of our clients don't even work in office parks. And furthermore, I want to share with you they've changed all the security at these places. So often we're going to have to go to 6 office parks to drop off one. So you're recognizing that for years that strategy must have worked incredibly. But let me show you some data that may suggest that we got to look at a different approach. Now, then what you're going to be doing then is generating a set of negative feelings about legacy practice. So then Kelly might be, well, I just think that's stupid. You also have to respect the idea that, it seems odd, don't you think, that our first contact with a prospect is going to be liking one of their posts. And I can only imagine how strange that is, given how we've done this for decades. But let me show you this piece of research by Edison. And Edison says that people of your age, Kelly, 50% of the time you go to LinkedIn is to check and see how many people liked or reacted to your last update. So I guess it makes sense that we should fish where the fish are biting. You see how the conversation is respectful, it's empathetic, but it still provides a disruptive insight. I just think that what the millennial needs to understand when they're doing this is to be able to back your stuff up. And don't ever try to mentor up based on an anecdotal experience that you've had. It makes it way too easy for them to reject you, not only as an advisor, but also to think that you just don't get it, right? Because the thing about boomer management style is we're systems oriented. So we go all the way back to Ed Deming and quality. That was a hugely, hugely foundational thing. The quality revolution changed everyone. The boomers realized that we can't live in a world of anecdotal inspection that produces rework. We got to live in statistical process control. So when they set up sales systems, it's this funnel, it's activity management. So when a millennial comes up and says, I tried it this way and it worked better, they're running into a brick wall. So that's my piece of advice to millennials is just make sure you respect the fact that boomers built this world that we work in now. Most of all the great companies at some point had adult supervision, whether it was Google or Tesla. And they built it with systems thinking. So if you're going to challenge the current system, you need to do it with data that suggests system-wide research. And I think that's the little thing that's usually missing from reverse mentorship.
That's
right.
It's such good stuff, Tim. But, as I listen to you explain all of that, though, what I see is a set of interpersonal skills that's incredibly rare today. Most people are, I want what I want it now because I'm used to getting it now and I can get it the way I want it when I want it. And you're talking about having a set of skills that includes patience and empathy and those kinds of things. When you go into a company and you witness an extreme lack of that sort of emotional intelligence, I assume you have to address it at some level, yes?
Yeah, you got to slow the game down. I think that's the advice I usually give. It's the one everybody can kind of wrap their arms around and say, I get it. And you go to the millennials and say, listen, you guys are wired really fast, okay? It's like my CPU ain't the same CPU you have. I do not have a dual core 3.7 gigahertz processor up in this business. I'm not running 2 gigs of RAM up in here, okay? I'm running a K-Pro processor. And my RAM is still like 10 megs.
Millennials, Google that.
Like you
K-Pro
literally got me
processor.
buffering
You're gonna
all
have
the
to
time,
Google that.
millennials.
Yeah,
So you
Google it.
slow the game down, right?
Right.
So when I talk to boomers about how to coach empathy out of somebody, the word empathy doesn't have meaning really to the new generation. But
Correct.
I think slowing it down, taking a little bit more time to getting it right, is a great coaching method to help the millennials slow down. Because when you slow down, you pay attention to things you're missing. Human beings are naturally empathetic. I mean, until we grow up. I mean, think about why you like a 5-year-old. Think about why you like a dog. They catch feelings.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And then
we don't do
eventually,
that.
as we kind of, what researchers would say, William James kind of started this theory, and then a lot of other empathy researchers have talked about it. Eric Fromm talked about this a lot. There's this wall that goes up as we turn into adult. And it's just this repeated, self-abuse of, all the bad negative emotions. So we kind of get full of our own problems, and then other people express emotions to us and it bounces off of us. And I mean, this wall goes up probably in our teen years. I mean, it doesn't happen when we're at our age, Kelly. This happens, it's a lifelong thing.
Absolutely.
So the secret is to get people to listen without power, to treat empathy as a superpower at work. That's what I tell people all the time.
Yeah.
If you can treat people's feelings as facts, you can lead them effectively. And let me tell you why. Psychologists have found that human beings give each other psychological benefits and it produces liking.
Yes.
My second book, The Likability Factor, was based on this idea that people are likable because they've developed the capacity to consistently make other people in their life feel good, even when giving bad news. And one of the cornerstones of likability is empathy, your attempt to see things from another person's point of view, but most of all, your acceptance of their feelings as facts. And when you change that conversation and you start to talk to people with that kind of empathy, you deliver an incredible benefit to them because now they are no longer alone. They aren't the only person in the world that knows what they're going through. So I'd recommend a book for both of you if you haven't read it. It's the last book that Dr. Stephen Covey Sr. wrote before he died. It's called The 8th Habit.
It's incredible.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and you have to remember, that's really, really, really hard for boomers. The idea of listening to my subordinates' feelings as facts. Are you kidding me? Sit down, shut up, and do what I tell you. I don't care about your feelings.
So,
I mean, that's a game changer for the boomer.
It's a game changer for everyone. But yes, the boomer, because we've been taught classically, if you want to go back to Druckerish management or even Porter or whomever.
Frederick Winslow Taylor, I mean, 1900, yeah.
So when you change the game at work, you reorganize the company, you change the compensation plan, you change the seating plan. When you change anything, who moved my cheese, you automatically produce a set of negative emotions, which means you're going to have an employee come to you and say, hey, Kelly, I'm really upset about the reorganization. I think it's going to really affect my career. I'm worried about losing my house. And what does Kelly do as a classic boomer who's been trained how to deal with this? Let me tell you something. I've thought about this. You shouldn't feel that way. Let me give you 5 reasons you shouldn't feel that way. 1, the reorganization is going to save the company. 2,
wait, you're reading from the talking points.
The reorganization is going to maximize shareholder value. 3, within 6 months, you're going to get over this reorganization and find a new home. And we do that, right? So we say you shouldn't feel that way. Well, that's the anti-empathy approach. You push people away, and then the person goes home alone, and they tell their spouse, they just don't get me. Or, and there's the other one we do, not so much at work, but we do it in personal relationships. We menfolk boomers are the worst. Someone comes to us and says, I'm really upset. And Kelly or I would say, I'm going to fix it. Just shut up. I'm going to go fix that right now. We don't have to talk about it anymore. I'm going to fix it. And it all comes back to that wall. Okay? And you got it too, Robbie. It's not just the boomers that have that wall. It's just that you're younger.
Thank
so the
you
wall
so
isn't
much.
fixed.
Thank
So
you.
Now,
everybody
I mean, as millennials, I mean, from moment one, and I'll push back a little bit on you there, Tim, because from moment one, we're taught that everyone's feelings matter, everyone's ideas matter. Let's listen to everyone. So, do we have some sort of wall? Absolutely, but as Hillary Clinton would say, it's a fence, it's not a wall. So, they're two different things.
Well, that actually, I love it. Let's push back a little bit. So, a feeling that matters is not the same thing as a feeling that's true. Okay. So you're pandering to someone when you say, well, Tim's feelings are hurt and that matters because he might quit. So let's throw him a party. Let's distract him. Let's show him a little bit of love. But they've never accepted that Tim should feel that way in the first place. And that's what I want from you. Yeah. The researcher says that in a conversation, when you express a negative emotion, the number one thing you want to do is feel like you've been heard and that your opinions have been respected. The fact that my feeling matters, though, still doesn't quite solve that problem. It just shows me that you care about me, but I don't want you to care about me. I want to be understood. So I think that's the fine line here. But at the same time, I do think that what the research does suggest is that the millennial generation has been forced to think a little bit more empathetically because of the widespread reality videos from TV shows to Facebook Lives, etc. So, like when they have people that have like various types of mental handicaps or people who lack empathy, right? So there's people that lack empathy, autistic kids experience this, etc. One of the great training programs is to show them movies and have them read novels, because the more we explore the lives of other people in a vivid sort of way, the more it fuses together those synaptic connections that makes us more empathetic. So the millennials, unlike the boomers, have just been immersed in this storytelling and immersed in these real world events so much that I do think they have a better tendency to be empathetic than any generation in history. So I think there's a real opportunity for the millennials to embrace this superpower called empathy and learn to say, I'm sorry you feel that way.
That's right. And by the way, this is why I can only
imagine how you feel.
This is why millennials make better leaders, going back to last week, because we are more inclined to empathy, which was what we talked about last week. I mean, Goldman talked about it in 98, and what really makes a leader, it's not your technical competence, it's your ability to connect with your people, and what Tim is saying, leveraging that empathy superpower. Pops, that's my big takeaway from today. I mean, slow down to get it right. I think if you combine that with the power of empathy and being intentional with your empathy and not, giving it the whole pat on the head and be condescending, but truly being empathetic, that's huge. I mean, that's true leadership in 2017 and beyond.
And something I want to give you, Robbie, too, as a takeaway for you too, is that, the next time you make an ask, I want you to always ask yourself, what would the founders of the company think about the ask? And that's going to, as they say in hip hop, you're going to check yourself just a little bit when you do that, because we do have common respect across generations for the founders of the organizations we work for. They created it all. And so when I coach millennials to say, here's how to get what you want out of life without burning bridges. We talked earlier about unteaching. I just want you to always review the ask through the eyes of the founder. And even if you decide that's okay, the founder's outdated, I'm going to make the ask anyway, you're just going to do it with more of a sense of respect, and you won't be so defensive when they push back, right? Because I think the other issue too is that millennials are perceived as a little bit precocious, a little bit defensive, a little bit precious. And the reason why is because they're not as rehearsed as we are. Like boomers have learned to rehearse in the mirror before they ask for a promotion or a raise. The millennial decides it, and they get up and they go ask for a promotion. And because they haven't thought it through, the first objection creates an emotional response, which perceived as being soft-skinned. Let me give you one more piece of advice, you guys, on empathy. And it's kind of a recent thing for me that's made a really, really, really big difference. You need to make sure that you operate under the right assumptions about other people. So Brent Adamson, I joked about him. He's the great guy at CEB, Challenger Sale co-author. He shared something with me out of a conversation with one of their CEO clients, just changed the way I manage. He talked to the CEO at this major company, and he said, well, what is the secret to the success here? Because you have the lowest turnover of any major company that's been studied. You're the most consistently ranked best company to work for by Fortune. What do you think the secret is? And they said, well, the secret is from how we hire to how we onboard to how we develop, we teach every one of our leaders to assume when faced with adversity. When faced with something that's not to your liking, you need to assume that the other person is operating under the best intentions.
API, assume positive intent. That's right.
Best intentions. So the other person has a different agenda than you do. They are just as courageous and purposeful as you are. It's the agendas that clash and not the people. And the way Brent said is like, just apply this to the next like traffic incident you have. The next person that pulls out in front of you, right? And when he said all that, I thought of a story that Dr. Covey Sr. shared with me years and years ago. He talked to me about this stockbroker in New York had gone home after a long day of trading and had been murdered on the floor, just had a horrible day at work. So he's on the subway going home, and he's sitting in the car next to this mom and her 5 kids, and the 5 kids are going crazy. They're going crazy. One of the kids is pulling at his briefcase. The other is screaming like a banshee, and the mom's just kind of staring off into space, and it frustrates the stockbroker. And so finally he turns to the mom, and he says, "What's wrong with you? Why don't you do something about your kids?" And she looks back at him with glassy eyes and says, "I don't know what to do. We just lost their father, and I'm taking them home to our parents, and I frankly don't know what to do." Wow. And that stockbroker, when he shared that story with Dr. Covey, said, "I will never judge so quickly again for the rest of my life." And that's what I want people to understand is that when you're working and things don't go right, someone acts in a way that you don't like, I want you to ask yourself, what is that person's purpose? What is their charter? Or ask yourself, what struggle are they going through that I have not yet discovered? If you do that, it's going to make a profound difference on your leadership behavior, but more importantly, it's going to create a culture of empathy. So that's the most important thing I like to instill is that assumption in other people.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Crazy good stuff from Tim Sanders. He's the author of Love is the Killer App and Deal Storming. And by the way, if you're in sales and you don't have deal storming, you're not nearly as good as you possibly could be. Really highly suggest that you get that particular book and add it to the list.
There you go. And you can download Sales Genius as a team sport, 32-page chapter of Deal Storming. You can download it at dealstorming.net/free. Free. I like it.
Love it. You're always about the free. By the way, my hot take from today with Tim, Robbie, has to be about the idea of demonstrating empathy by slowing down. That really resonates with me. It's really interesting how you can communicate an idea by using different words. And I'm very much like you, Tim, and probably not nearly to the degree, but a really big fan of understanding words and the meanings of words and so forth. Hey, it's episode number 29 here at Counter Mentors. You can hear all of them on iTunes. And if you're listening on the pod, great to have you. It would really be a big deal for us if you go on and rate and review the show. If you like more content like Tim, and if you don't, you're probably not our ideal listener anyway. But if you do, you want to go on and rate and review the show. And by the way, watch the video as well, countermentors.com. That's going to wrap it up. Episode number 29 of the books. For Robbie and for Tim Sanders, I'm Kelly Riggs. We'll see you next time.
Come on! Thanks for tuning into Counter Mentors with Kelly and Robbie Riggs. For more information about the show, to listen to past shows, or to learn more about how Kelly and Robbie teach companies the counter mentoring process, visit countermentors.com. The Counter Mentors Show is presented by One-on-One Media, Incorporated. All rights reserved. Opinions expressed by guests on the show may not be the opinions of One-on-One Media or the host of the Counter Mentor Show.